Speed dating really was a meat market for the middle-aged. For me, being thrown in front of a sea of expectant women was like being thrown to the lions. Or should that be lionesses? Regardless, once I'd entered the speed dating room, from this point onwards, everything was a bit of a blur. I remember being directed towards my first lady and little else thereafter, except that just when you felt you'd begun to have a rapport with somebody, the buzzer went and the men all had to move round to the next table. There was no time to make notes about the conversation with the person you'd just met. All I could do was tick the yes or no box on the basis of gut instinct. Some of the faces still stand out in my mind, while others were almost forgotten instantly. Just like Bertie Bassett, the women were all sorts with very different backgrounds. Secretaries and teachers, joined a shop owner, a sex therapist, medical sales rep, security guard, and one or two ladies of leisure. Although I don't remember what I said or how I said it, my trepidation vanished and I threw myself into the spirit of the occasion and confessed to enjoying myself immensely. In fact, I was quite disappointed when we stopped for a break halfway through the evening. Most of the men slipped out of the room to get a top-up from the bar, while the majority of ladies stayed put to confide in one another as to their experiences so far. Then we were off again. Eventually, of course, I ended up across a table from Barbara and we were briefly able to compare notes. Being a worldly wise East London lady who's seen and done it all when it comes to relationships, Barbara wasn't terribly impressed with the potential prospects. They'd all seemed a tad parochial in outlook. Actually, this wasn't the expression she used. It was more along the lines of, what am I doing here amongst all these country bumpkins? And it was little wonder that they hadn't all turned up chewing bits of straw. This moment in time had confirmed her worst suspicions. Once you go beyond the sanctuary of the M25 ring, all the men are slow-witted, rustic rural types with little to offer a streetwise lady such as herself. She hadn't been impressed by Cole, the bus driver, who apparently was supremely arrogant and could talk of nothing but the complexities of driving his big green bus down narrow country lanes. She declared that the horse rider Tom was obviously still madly in love with the woman who had walked out on him 6 months earlier. A handy tip here, Tom: if you're really looking for a new partner, then don't bore the arse off of people with stories about your old one, because it's rather off-putting. And as for poor old Derek, well, all the women had immediately spotted he was wearing a toupee. This explained his funny lopsided look. I wondered how many women had selected him as a possible date. However, none of us would know whether we had secured ourselves a date or two until the following day. Barbara and I left the venue and she came back to my place for a cup of cocoa before making her way back to the smoke to await news of how successful the night had been. The organisers would cross-match our tick boxes with those of others, and if they corresponded, then we would be given the telephone numbers of those we'd matched with. A text message on our own mobile phones would alert us when to call and find out more. So, how did Barbara and I do?